So we're ready.
It's Boffo and Babs.
Who's making my melody?
This Boffo is the theater of your mind. Oh, and I love it, Charles. Oh. Yes.
Here, in the middle of our vast ocean, is Atlantis, our mighty empire.
The mystery of a mother empire which stretched her civilization to both sides of the Atlantic has been the fascinating subject of thousands of books and millions of words of controversy by science, literature, and even today's headlines. Suddenly, you are living thousands of years ago in a civilization even more advanced scientifically than our own.
We created wonders for the good of mankind, then turned them into monsters.
Atlantis is the story of those who, like today, would use the marvels of science to conquer and enslave. This, then, was Atlantis, a land of violent contrasts, amusing themselves at the expense of human agony. Atlantis, a world that worshipped strange gods of science, a science gone berserk in the dread house of fear.
You will be a bull. Every day in every way, you will become more and more like one.
A diabolical laboratory where humans were transformed into half men, half beasts. Atlantis, a land that harnessed the power of a volcano's fiery heart and learned to store the energy of the sun in giant crystals, then used them to create secret weapons whose disintegrating rays could destroy the rest of the world. Atlantis, a civilization that advanced too far until nature turned in cataclysmic revolt against an evil land.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order.
And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
And for the international order that we have worked for generations to build.
Founders declared a new order of the ages. They were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
You understand that America was founded by Christians as a Christian nation. However, there were always those people on the other side who wanted to use America, use our military power and our financial power to establish enlightened democracies throughout the world and restore Lost Atlantis.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America?
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment, pertinent facts, far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
I do conscientiously and sincerely believe that the order of Freemasonry, if not the greatest, is one of the greatest moral and political evils under which the Union is now laboring. A conspiracy of the few against the equal rights of many. Masonry ought forever to be abolished. It is wrong, essentially wrong, a seed of evil which can never produce any good.
As America marches forward, spreading democracy throughout the globe, is she merely promoting freedom or fulfilling an ancient plan? Is she following a course planned for centuries by men who believe she is chosen for a secret destiny? To understand the present and possibly the future, we look into the past as we unfold the secret mysteries of America's beginnings. Can America be the new Atlantis?
Damn right. And now for a feature presentation.
It's interesting, in the New Atlantis, Bacon writes, he says, at that time, he's talking about in ancient times, this land was known and frequented by the ships and vessels of all the nations before named. And then he talks about the Phoenicians, the Tyrians, the Carthaginians, the Egyptians, the Chinese, and the Palestinians. Okay, so he's talking about ancient Atlantis, and he's talking about how Atlantis, which now, at the time that he's writing, is but full of junks and canoes, he said. He's referring to the Indians, you know, who were about in canoes. And he says, but at one time, they abounded with these tall ships. And they had trading with throughout the world and so on. The big picture there with all the coins, those are Roman coins that were found in the 4th century AD off the coast of Vermont. Okay? Then he's got different travelers that are carved in the upper, I guess the upper right-hand corner. These are some of the different travelers. They're images that were discovered in the New Hampshire, Vermont areas. Below, he's got this figure there just below that. And the caption up above, you probably can't read it, but it says, the Druids of New England. And so he's talking about the Druids coming to the New England area centuries and centuries long before Columbus supposedly discovered America. We find Baal worship in early America. This is a place called Mystery Hill in New Hampshire. It's just outside the town of Salem. And there you've got the caption below reads, this larger image refers to a Beltane stone. Beltane is a holiday that's practiced today by witches. And Beltane is a holiday that celebrates and glorifies the god Bel or Baal. Bel and Baal are one and the same. On the other side, you have two images. One of them is a cast, and they've outlined in white the Eye of Bel, or the Eye of Baal. And if you can see the image just below that, the similarity between the Eye of Baal and the all-seeing eye of the Egyptians is startling. You study the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Osiris throughout ancient Egypt. But here this is found centuries and centuries prior to the discovery of the New World by Columbus. Now this is a place, not to be confused, this is called America's Stonehenge. This is Mystery Hill. Now, in one of our other documentaries, we talk about the Georgia Guidestones, and that's called sometimes the American Stonehenge. Well, there's actually a website you can go to for Mystery Hill, and they call it, quote, America's Stonehenge. And you can actually go there today and take a tour of America's Stonehenge. And again, it's near the town of Salem in New Hampshire, and this is from one of their magazines. It says, quote, inscribed tablets of the ancient Canaanite god Baal, Celtic god Bel, have been found on this site. Worshippers of Baal were associated with fertility rites, sun worship, and human sacrifice. I was pretty surprised to find that, but it's on the internet today. Now, one of the guys who really, probably the driving force through the 20th century to really encapsulate and to define the whole idea of Atlantis and America and the connection between them was Manly P. Hall. The guy who designed the Masonic House of the Temple was commissioned, he was a total New Age guy who designed the Masonic House of the Temple in D.C., and because his design was so successful, he was then hired to design all of these other major buildings throughout D.C. It's very interesting, but anyway, the Scottish Rite Journal referred to Hall. They made mention of the fact that he was, quote, often referred to as Masonry's greatest philosopher. Scottish Rite Journal, 1990. He says, quote, thousands of years ago, these mystical orders, he's talking about secret societies, were aware of the existence of the Western Hemisphere and the great continent which we call America. The bold resolution was made that this Western continent should become the site of the philosophic empire. And this is what Sir Francis Bacon, according to Hall and other Baconian authors, was all about. He sent the reason Bacon is significant is because he sent his secret societies to America early on. In fact, it's believed that that the Jamestown colony probably had representatives or guys in it who were sent by Bacon specifically. One of the early settlements in America is in the town of Ephrata, the Ephrata Cloister, which is in Pennsylvania. It's right near or right about Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was there a couple of months ago. It's kind of a funny story. I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania speaking, and I was talking about this, and I was telling them about the Ephrata Cloister, and I had no idea. They all knew. They're all sitting there looking at me like I'm an idiot because they knew it was right down the road. And I'm standing there talking about it like they'd never heard of it before. But it was originally a Rosicrucian settlement, and it's there today. Okay? A Rosicrucian settlement. So these are two of Hall's books that I wanted to draw your attention to. One, the one that has kind of a white background, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This is Hall's great magnum opus. This is why many people believe he is the great occult wisdom teacher of the 20th century, because he basically dedicated his whole life to going all over the world and gathering all of the esoteric occult wisdom teachings and philosophies from all the traditions. And he compiled them in this book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And if you go get a copy, it's like this huge book. But he teaches in there everything from Masonry to Rosicrucianism to Kabbalah to literally telling you how you can draw a pentagram on the floor and conjure up a demon and make a pact with Lucifer. Okay? He's actually got that in his book. He gives you a couple of different kind of pacts that you can make with the devil once you summon him. So that's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. His other book, The Secret Destiny of America, is the one where he really goes into a lot of detail about America's founding from the perspective of these esoteric occult societies. And I just want to reiterate, because some people get the wrong idea or the wrong impression when I talk about these things, but I want to reiterate what Dr. Stan said earlier. I definitely acknowledge, and so does David Bay, who worked with me on this, that Christians certainly came to America early on and have played a very important role in the founding and the development of America. But the conflict that we see in America today, from what I've studied, is not a conflict that began in the 1960s, as many people think. It's a conflict that has been here right from the beginning. In fact, if you read the writings of William Bradford, who came over on board the Mayflower and was the chief governor of the Plymouth colony for like 30 some odd years. He wrote a history of the Plymouth plantation. If you read his history, he talks about very early on a neighboring colony that erected a maypole, okay? And they were getting drunk and bringing in the Indian women, and they were dancing about it in these pagan ceremonies. And he talks about how it looked as though they were resurrecting the bizarre orgies of the Bacchanalia. And so he had an awareness. It's very clear. And that's the Bacchanalia, this worship of Bacchus, the ancient god, Bacchus. And he talks about how fornication and adultery and homosexuality even were being practiced by people there right in early America, back in the 1600s. And Bradford is writing about this stuff. So part of the point that we try to make is not to deny the Christian heritage of America, but to acknowledge that this conflict has been around right from the beginning. And that while, yes, there were Christians who came here and they wanted to build their churches and they wanted to worship the Lord and preach the gospel, and I'm certainly very thankful that they did, but they were not alone. There were other people who came here and they had a completely different idea about what America was supposed to be. So this is a quote from Hall in Secret Destiny. He says, quote, "The English program was under the direction of Sir Francis Bacon." He's talking about the Baconian societies and the influence of Bacon during the Elizabethan era. He says, "The English program was under the direction of Sir Francis Bacon, and it was his genius that gave purpose to the enterprise. Bacon quickly realized that here in the New World was the proper environment for the accomplishment of his great dream, the establishment of the philosophic empire." And what Hall maintained and what he writes about is that Bacon sent these secret societies to the New World. And in chapter 13 of this book, the chapter heading is literally Bacon's Secret Society is set up in America. And now what you've got, I want to draw your attention to this picture that Hall publishes in this book. In the center, you've got Benjamin Franklin. Most people probably recognize him. You have Benjamin Franklin overlooking the eastern seaboard of the United States. Now behind him is the shadow of Sir Francis Bacon, as though Bacon is influencing the decisions that Benjamin Franklin made. Now we talk in Secret Mysteries about all that Ben Franklin did. Benjamin Franklin was a very high-ranking Freemason. He was most likely a Rosicrucian as well. And I'll talk more about Rosicrucianism here in a minute. He was most likely a Rosicrucian as well. He was the master of the lodge in Pennsylvania, here in America. He became the Grand Master of the Lodge in Paris, France. He initiated Voltaire in France. Other members of that lodge were John Paul Jones and the Marquis de Lafayette, who fought with George Washington. Lafayette, when he came to America, brought with him a guy named Pierre Charles L'Enfant. L'Enfant was the architect who designed the city layout for Washington, D.C. Okay, with all that in mind. So Benjamin Franklin is Grand Master of the Lodge in Pennsylvania, Grand Master of the Lodge in Paris, and he's a member of a secret group in England known as the Hellfire Club. And he was very good friends with a guy named Sir Francis Dashwood. And Dashwood was the founder of the Hellfire Club there in England. It was a very occult society that dedicated a lot of time to mocking Christianity and having all of these anti-Christian ceremonies and things like that. And they actually had a phrase written above the entryway to the Hellfire Club, which went down into this underground area. And the phrase was, "Do what you will shall be the whole of the law." And what they were doing, this is centuries before the Satanist Aleister Crowley, which many of you will know if you've listened to Dr. Stan or if you've seen the video, They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll. You know how nefarious Aleister Crowley was. Well, long before Crowley, there was the Hellfire Club. And they based the phrase on this radical, heretical French priest named Francois Rabelais, who wrote this series of books called Gargantua and Pantagruel. And there they have this society that's built up, and it's called the Abbey Thelema. Okay? The Abbey Thelema. And in the Abbey Thelema, which is a mockery of the whole idea of a Catholic Church and so on, in the Abbey Thelema, they just have one law: do what you will. And so that's what the Hellfire Club wrote above their hideout. And the Abbey Thelema, for those who have studied Crowley, well, actually Aleister Crowley had a retreat where he performed occult rituals, and he called it the Abbey Thelema. So Benjamin Franklin is a member then of secret societies in America, in England, and in France. These were the three countries that were involved in the Revolutionary War. Okay? And many people find this very, very interesting. And I could talk more about that, but I'm going to move on. So Franklin now in this picture, you've got Bacon as a shadow behind him, and then Franklin overlooking the eastern seaboard. Now you'll notice that there on the eastern seaboard, you've got Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. And just south of Baltimore, in time, would be Washington, D.C. One of the researchers that we interview, a guy named Jim Allison, has a website up, and he talks about these global alignments. And he talks about all of these ancient monuments like Easter Island and the pyramids and so on, and how they're all built in alignment one with another. And he has like a lot of really interesting information. Well, one of the things that he talks about, and we interview him, is the alignment of the Revolutionary War cities in America. And this is actually from his website. We do like a 3D animation in the film, but I wanted to show you what he's got on his site. And up there up north, you've got Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington, D.C. And these are all built in a perfect alignment along the eastern seaboard. So the question that we ask, considering that it was Masons who came to this country early on, they were sent by Bacon, and Rosicrucians were sent with them. Now, in Rosicrucianism in a nutshell, the symbol for Rosicrucianism is the rose and the cross. For those who remember Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code, he talks about secret information being sub rosa, beneath the rose. And it's a reference to hidden information, hidden knowledge, secret knowledge. And so the rose represents collectively the mystery religions, the pagan religions, the occult. The cross represents Christianity. And Rosicrucianism is what you get when you combine paganism and Christianity. This is why the Gnostics, for example, you can go to a Rosicrucian website today. You can go to AMORC, the Ancient Mystical Order of the Rose and Cross, online today. Look them up, and they will tell you flat out, oh yeah, they embrace ancient Gnosticism. They embrace Christianity. They embrace all these religious traditions. If you read the writings of Sir Francis Bacon, who was a very ardent Rosicrucian, in fact, his New Atlantis was called the New Atlantis, the land of the Rosicrucians, the land of the Rosicrucians. Why? Because it is this combination, it's this fusion of paganism and Christianity. That's what it represents. That's why when you read Bacon, so much of the time you'll read Bacon and he's talking about the Lord Jesus Christ and he's talking about the atonement on the cross. He's talking about all these things that sound very, very Christian. And then he'll go and talk about Pallas Athena and the god Apollo and, all of these other pagan traditions, and they're all blended together. And this makes it very, very difficult. I mean, if you want to, when you're examining American history, and you're looking at guys, some people will quote somebody like Benjamin Franklin, and he may have some quotes here and there about prayer and about calling out to God and this kind of thing. But if you don't understand how he could do that, how he could refer to the Bible and then refer to the occult, but Rosicrucianism really explains how that's possible, because it's the embracing of both ideas. If you follow this alignment from, real quick, Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, it leads you to Stonehenge. And so the alignment is built in perfect alignment with Stonehenge. Now in Rosicrucianism, part of the reason I started to tell you this, they have what is called the Hermetic maxim. The Hermetic maxim is as above, so below. And you will see statues or drawings or paintings or so on. Probably, if any of you have ever seen the Baphomet, okay, which is that goat-headed looking devil thing, sitting cross-legged, right, with a flame above his head. Well, next time you see it, look, and you'll see he's got one hand going like this, and another hand going down that way, okay? And it means as above, so below. There's even a statue of George Washington that was done. I think it's in the Smithsonian. But you've got Washington sitting there dressed like some Roman god, and he's got one hand up and one hand down. As above, so below. Now, the reason that's important, because that's a very dominant principle and teaching in the occult, is the reason that the pyramids were built in alignment with the stars is because of that maxim. The reason that they build things in alignment with astrology and things like that is because they're looking to the heavens, that which is above, and they're trying to imitate that which is above down below. And so this would explain why they would build these things in alignment, because the thinking would be, if this was intentional, the thinking would be that the early American cities would be empowered by the same powers that empower Stonehenge. That's the whole reason for doing it, because the Rosicrucian, the occultist, believes if they design a building or a city or whatever in alignment with the stars, that those same gods and goddesses that are above are going to empower you down below. And so they're drawing upon this occult power. So the question is, was this accidental? Is this just a coincidence? Or was this the intentional design of these secret societies who came to America early on? And we pose the question. All right, so here's another quote from Hall. Hall says, "It must be remembered that Bacon did not play a lone hand. He was the head of a secret society, including in its membership the most brilliant intellectuals of his day. All these men were bound together by a common oath to labor in the cause of a world democracy. Bacon's Society of the Unknown Philosophers," that's the reference to the New Atlantis, these wise philosophers who are hidden away and nobody knows who they are. Bacon's Society of the Unknown Philosophers included men of high rank and broad influence. Together with Bacon, they devised the colonization scheme. Now, what's interesting about the Society of Unknown Philosophers, this leader in the story, the New Atlantis, this leader comes out, and he's the head of, one of the heads of the House of Solomon. And he shares with these Christian sailors what the treasures of the House of Solomon are. And he starts describing what the treasures are. And he starts describing tall buildings and flying machines and submarines and underwater breathing apparatuses. And he's describing sound studios where they have instruments that that allow you to speak and to project your voice over a long period or a great distance and so on. He's describing zoos. He's describing experiments upon animals, injecting them with poison to see how they'll respond so that that knowledge can then be used for the benefit of mankind. And he's describing all of these things, most of which did not exist during that era, but things that would be developed through the 19th and the 20th century in America. And this has caused a lot of people to marvel when they read Bacon's work.
Oh, now. So you see, Boffo, you have already created the ideal environment in which an occult culture can grow, nay, flourish. Exactly. So now, you just sort of sit back and relax and enjoy the view. No need to be so hands-on anymore. Papa Bear. Watch them go hang themselves.
Themselves? Turns out I'm a damn good father after all.
Best?
Boffo, darling, there we are, as mercy and severity. Oh, and then the yin-yang.
Love this one was.
Done. Oh, and look, it's your favorite American symbology. Show me golden ratio.
Who doesn't have to turn you more than me?
By all accounts, the masses.
Dumbass.